In Twitter Files number 15, Mr. Taibbi, you exposed Hamilton 68, a website associated with the German Marshall Fund that purported in a dashboard to identify Russian bot networks and became ubiquitously cited by media to identify media stories or narratives that supposedly flowed from Russia. From Russia! You showed that the front man for Hamilton 68 was Clint Watts, a former FBI agent. At Twitter, the trust and safety executives were ridiculing Hamilton 68 for the ludicrous identifications that it was making, which they could reverse engineer and figure out who those accounts were. And then in Twitter Files number 17, after disclosing Mr. Watts' identity, you disclosed that J.M. Berger is the creator of Hamilton 68. And guess what? He was a federal contractor, right?
He was, yes. He denies that he worked on it for the Global Engagement Center, but he was an employee of theirs until about a month before the dashboard's release.
Just a month before. And he said, I believe publicly, that the dashboard was the product of 3 years' work. So doesn't it beg sort of the intriguing question whether the creation of this fraudulent Hamilton 68 dashboard was effectively underwritten by government funding?
Yes, I think that's a good question. Certainly the German Marshall Fund, which is the NGO that is at the top of the chain in this organization. It's the German Marshall Fund, then the Alliance for Securing Democracy, and then Hamilton 68. They're a federal contractor. They received over $1 million from the Department of Defense. They're the board of the Alliance for Securing Democracy, has a former acting head of the CIA, a former deputy head of the NSA, a former chief of the DHS on it. So
I want to make, and the bigger point is hard because the examples sometimes start making it. I want to introduce you to, or introduce the country to somebody else. I think you've mentioned it in one of your writings, Richard Stengel. You know who that is?
Yes, he's the former, the first head of the Global Engagement Center.
I want the American people to hear from him for 30 seconds.
Basically, every country creates their own narrative story. And you know, my old job at the State Department was what people used to joke as the chief propagandist job. We haven't talked about propaganda. Propaganda, I'm not against propaganda. Every country does it, and they have to do it to their own population.
Every country does it. Every country does propaganda, and they have to do it to their own people, is what Mr. Stengel said. If I understand correctly, he was the head of the Global Engagement Center at its creation, right?
He was, and in his book, Information Wars, there are a number of passages where he talks about creating a whole-of-government solution to the information problem. He hastened to say that he didn't want to create a, quote, information ministry, but what he was describing roughly approximates that.
In the half minute I've got left, he also was associated with Hamilton 68, right?
The Global Engagement Center certainly had ties to Hamilton 68.
I think it's closer than that. That'll come out.
Okay. Well, I'd be anxious to hear that.
I hope I'll get yielded in a minute or two from somebody else down the way. There's all sorts of stuff to disclose. This committee has to uncover not that single instance, but this system that you have described. This is the hope that Americans have to set this right. This committee, and that hostility shows what we're up against. It's not 3 pillars to the system, it is 4. And you're seeing the left move to crush you and anybody else who tries to expose this. I yield.